And it looks like we are live here for episode 10 of Start, Scale, Grow, a podcast focused on talent for businesses that are starting, scaling, or growing. Here with my friend and probably soon to be yours, Alana Bennett. And we're going to be talking about the world post-COVID, this post-COVID hiring blitz, then the layoffs in the tech sector and what that's sort of meant for the workforce. And I think Alana's got some pretty firm thoughts on what we're going through at the moment. But Alana, welcome. Thank you. Did you want to take a minute or so to tell everyone about yourself, who you are? I did joke prior to recording that you'd have no problem doing that, but let's see if that's true.
Thank you so much for having me, giving me a little rib. I love it. Look, in terms of intro, I'm going to assume that everyone here is really au fait with LinkedIn, and I'm sure that you've all gone and checked me out at this point on who is this chick. So why don't I share the juicy stuff that you don't see on LinkedIn? Isn't that like cooler?
Do it.
So what do you need to know about me? Yeah, I have a husband and two little boys, 10 and 12, almost 10, almost 12. They definitely make sure that I know that, who definitely keep me active and alive for sure, without a doubt. I have learnt to play tennis because they are deep tennis fans. I am committed to their development because I want to be that parent that travels the circuit with their tennis champ child. I always say I will only travel first class, but I will be with you every single step of the way.
Like a hockey mum.
Right? Yeah. I am an identical twin. I have an identical twin sister, and we have that whole twin thing that's going on. We both experienced each other's morning sickness when the other one was pregnant. We've had the whole know something is wrong, something has been wrong. We're super, super, super close. I come from a really close Italian family, and I think the reason why all of that is important, Simon, because it's really shaped not only who I am, but actually kind of how I move in the world. And if I think about where I've landed with a real passion around connection, that is a deep value of mine, but actually it's a really deep value in my family. And I think it's always existed in terms of when we came together. It was, of course, it was always around food, but it was the purpose of kind of coming together. If anyone was sad, it was always about connecting over food. Yeah. Which, maybe nutritionists these days will say, let's not reward by food. That still is a thing in my house.
So how come you aren't the size of a house? I guess.
I exercise. That is the only reason. But let it be known, this morning I actually let my kids have apple pie after their breakfast cereal.
Mother of the Year award going too.
Correct. Can we have ice cream too? I said, a little bit. But yes, actually, why don't you take that sugar high to school with your teachers rather than have it on my watch?
Yeah, they'll appreciate it.
So that's me. I'm, I think that's the fun stuff to know, right?
Lovely. Tell us a little bit about the work you've been doing recently.
Yeah, so I'm doing a whole heap of stuff. What I will say is what is threaded through all of my work is this idea of how are we designing for connection within the employee experience. So I've done some great work with a client on specifically mapping for connection within their employee experience, a global client and a business that is hybrid working, but very much a remote first business. Yep. I'm also designing leadership development programs, but really bespoke programs that look at what are the unique challenges in that organisation and how do we develop the leaders in that context. And then I do a bit of coaching and facilitation as well, which that all kind of keeps me busy enough and fulfilled enough, I should say.
And so this is really interesting. So, I mean, we've been through the flaming dumpster fire that was COVID. We've been through, I'm talking specifically about sort of the tech space now, this post-COVID hiring blitz where everybody had disposable income, businesses were pivoting, VC funds were investing huge amounts in businesses and telling them to grow at all costs, and particularly in the tech sector that the talent market was just ridiculous.
Yeah. And
then for the last year, we've seen this sort of some people call it normalization, other people would call it the tech wreck, I think is the official term. And in and amongst all of that, we've seen sort of the necessity for remote first working. Everybody suddenly had to be. Some businesses rushed to get back to the office, others didn't. Others have, I think, moved to sort of remote/hybrid really well. I think probably most haven't. Yeah. I think a couple of the overarching things that I've seen and heard is that leading remote teams presents far different challenges than when you're in person, which I'm sure is something you're going to talk about. The other thing that I think I've seen and heard a lot of is businesses trying to replicate the in-office experience, but in a remote way.
Yeah.
Again, two totally different things.
Correct.
I don't know that many people miss the corporate kitchen, but for me, because I was always hanging around the fridge, that was where I did all my best
work.
That's where I did all my best catch-ups with my main stakeholders and execs. I might even make you a coffee.
Yes.
But those little things like that we've kind of missed now. Again, slightly off topic, but I think I've had this sort of rising feeling probably for the last few months of this, the newest cohort into our workforce who probably graduated late 2019, early 20, whatever, but just before COVID.
Yeah.
And have never fully experienced being in the office day in, day out. They've never experienced the things that are, I think, that build growth but build character as well. So things like having a challenging discussion with your manager, maybe at a performance review, and having to be in the office the next day, not having the luxury of just turning off your camera on Zoom or not being available or taking a half day or whatever it is. You had to be there 5 days a week. You and I have grown up with that. And some would argue that that's old school and draconian, whatever. Fine, but there was stuff that came out of that, and I think what we're getting at is the connection that you're interested in. So, I guess that's the stuff that we sort of want to have a chat about today. But I think out of all of this, and I know you've got a whole bunch of research that you talk about, but you thread into this loneliness epidemic that's really sort of seems to be prevailing at the moment. A surge in mental health and anxiety. All these things must be related. So they present really difficult things for businesses to work through and manage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Where to start, right? I mean, it's so complex. It is. And it's so big. Let me come back to let's start at the start, right? Yeah. We're human. Let's start there. And our core need is to connect.
Yeah.
It is as fundamental to our well-being as food, water, shelter. We have got decades of research that tells us that. We were not designed to be isolated beings. We are social beings, right? And we've seen that. We've seen that if we go all the way back to, the tribes and how we taught, and everything was all about being together, and we learnt together, and that's just how we're designed.
Yeah.
And the challenge is we've been living very isolated lives.
Yeah.
And there is so much research, and the research is actually really scary in this space of this global loneliness pandemic. The US Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, if you haven't seen his stuff, you've got to read it. He talks about the direct link to our physical well-being that loneliness is having. Reporting things like it's as bad as smoking, it's the heart disease. It is like it just blows your mind when you start to look at it. And the anecdote for all of it is connection.
Yeah.
Right? It seems so simple, but because of the nature in which our world has evolved over the last few years, it is so complex.
Yeah.
Quite often we hear this analogy of we're the most connected we've ever been, right? Think about the digital world in which we're living, yet we're the most disconnected we've ever been.
Yeah.
There's this huge reliance on, the texting. And what's really interesting, and I don't know if you did do this, or maybe it might spark you to take action post this call, is I've started to voice message more. So rather than send a text, it's actually send a voice message.
Yeah.
It is the coolest experience when a friend sends you a voice message back and you hear their voice, right? So much of what we communicate and how we communicate is through sound, right? It's the non-verbal stuff. It's the body cues. And we're missing so much of that in how we engage.
Yeah.
So I think, at a starting point, that's non-negotiable. Like there are no lies in any of what I've said, right? There is bucket loads of research that will support all of that.
Just on this subject of voice messages, new feature on LinkedIn, voice messaging.
Yeah. Is it?
I received
Actually, I did see that.
voice messages over the last couple of weeks, and it was different. It was great.
Yeah.
Again, rather than sitting typing a message, just
Right.
say what you think straight into it. I mean,
Exactly.
we used Loom
Yes.
for time to do just little Loom messages to stakeholders on a Friday. Rather than typing a message as you end a week report, you just have a screen. You'd record a quick 2-minute video. They'd appreciate the personal touch. So
Correct.
those things are relatively simple to do.
Absolutely.
So we've got the opportunity for connection more than we ever had, but we're feeling more disconnected.
Yeah.
Does any of this, do you think, tie into this world of convenience that we've made for ourselves? You can order food like that. You can find a movie like that. I don't know about you, but you Friday night and your family night in front of the TV, and someone says, "What are we going to watch?" There's just too many options.
Correct.
It's the agony of choice.
Correct.
Yeah, music on demand, food on demand.
Correct.
With things like Tinder relationships, if you want to call it that, on demand.
Correct.
But has the convenience of all that actually disconnected us?
Absolutely. I believe it has, because if we come back to how do we build connection, it's like trust. It's these small moments of experiences that we share between people that slowly build up over time. There's Dr. Ali Walker, she's written this book, Click or Clash.
Yeah.
And she talks about that now. Her work is both work and personal in terms of how you want to connect with people. But she talks about we've got connection intensity preferences and connection frequency preferences, right? So connection intensity being like, how deep does it need to be? So if I'm meeting someone for the first time, I'm probably going to be lower on the intensity scale because we're just getting to know each other, right? I'm not going to share my deepest, darkest secret in that first conversation. They'd probably go, whoa, chick, like, you need to back up. But as we get to know each other, we start to share more. We inherently know this if we look at relationships in our lives.
Yeah.
If we then look at the connection frequency, that is then saying, how often do we need to connect? What does that look like? What's my natural preference, right? Now, we can all operate across this whole dynamic of intensity and frequency, but we naturally will have a preference for what feels good to us. And I think herein lies the challenge when it comes to connection in the world in which we're operating. As I started, we're all human, right? So we're all different. We will all want to connect in different ways. And the challenge is that we've now got a situation where we're in teams where perhaps we all don't have the same connection preferences.
Yeah.
Yet we're designing one way in which we connect. And what we need to be doing is, as teams and leaders of teams, is actually embarking on a conversation that quite simply says, hey, how do you guys want to stay connected? What does it look like for our team? Do you want to connect lots?
Yeah.
Do you want to connect in small amounts but like deeply?
Yeah.
Or do you want lots that's kind of just fun, the trivia, I think everyone's over that, by the way, but there's such variability here.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, leadership isn't a one-size-fits-all game anyway. I think it's the first thing. Even if COVID never happened and we were all in the office, the advice I've been giving to new leaders is one size doesn't fit all.
Correct.
You've got to learn to understand your people, connect. On another topic, I wrote a piece, I want to say almost 10 years ago now. I think I called it Why I Hate Valentine's Day. And Valentine's Day to me is really symptomatic of some of the things that are wrong with the relationships. And that's personal relationships or work relationships, whatever, connection. Big grandiose gestures every now and then, once a year, because you have to.
Yeah.
Don't create good relationships.
Yeah.
The little things that you do for each other without thinking about it. I make my wife a cup of coffee every morning.
Yeah.
I've got a pretty cool home gym. I come out of the gym at 7:00, make a coffee. She's just getting up usually. The little things that you do for each other are the things that show how much you care.
Correct.
So that's why this thing of every year Valentine's Day comes up and I just roll my eyes. It drives me nuts. Yeah. And I remember writing about that and people going, I kind of know what you mean, but I like it. Valentine's Day. I was like, hey, we all do. But they're not the things that define a relationship.
Correct. Yeah. So, and the reality is that applies in all facets of our employee experience, right? How I like to be appreciated, how I like to be recognized, how I want to be rewarded, how I like to receive feedback, good and improvement feedback. And yet, again, the challenge is, let's not ignore the elephant in the room, right? our leaders are probably the most overwhelmed they've ever been, because they have now got to do this deep individual personalisation. Whereas when you're in an office, there probably was a bit of a, we'll be right, we're all amongst each other, we'll kind of figure it out.
But again, I think in the office, you get a lot more of that incidental connection.
Correct.
Swinging around to someone, saying, "Hey, Dave, you've got 2 minutes. Can I just show you something?"
Correct.
That sort of thing. You don't get that anymore. It's got to be a
Exactly.
message on Slack. It's got to be a message on Teams.
Correct.
I don't want to. I've messaged this person 10 times a day. I feel like I'm overloaded.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's a new skill set that managers have to.
It is. Correct.
And businesses as a whole.
Correct. And on that, Priya Parker, who I'm sure you're well aware of, and her amazing book, The Art of the Gathering, she talks about we've lost the hardware of connection. The hardware being our offices, right? The physical dwellings that we went to where spontaneity enforced connection. Yes, in the coffee room. Yes, around the table. Even think about how we used to go to meetings, right? We'd rock into the meeting room. We'd all probably sit there. Hey, how you going? Now we're not even doing that virtually. We're jumping in the meeting. We're straight to business. Now, I won't say that all the time. There are definitely teams where they are having that moment. But what she talks about is now what we need to be doing is actually focusing on the software of connection. What is a skill that we're building to actually enable connection to flourish in teams and organisations?
I did an episode probably 2 years ago now with Andrew Murphy, who does a lot of coaching for engineering leaders, managing remote teams. And one of the things he talked about was this transactional dialogue.
Yeah.
When everything is about something that's got to be delivered. When's that happening? When's that happening? And when things are purely transactional, there is no opportunity for connection, because all you're doing is focusing on the next task, the next thing, the next deliverable.
Correct.
And again, you lose those incidental moments where you're all going out for lunch and you're all stuck in the lift together. And
exactly.
Someone gets off at the wrong floor and you'll laugh. Like these little things along the way.
Spot
these
on.
Thousands of those little things that happen over the course of a month together.
Exactly.
Teams.
Correct.
So how does this sit then in your view, how does this sit with the probably the large percentage of people who never want to go back to the office? I don't want to do the 40-minute commute. Like, it's a waste of my time. It's this, it's that. Who value that, or who online on platforms say they value not having to have a half-hour commute over sitting in a crappy room, a crappy meeting about X, Y, Z.
Yeah. So I think there are so many layers to this, right? And I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think the challenge that we're experiencing at the moment is we're hearing organisations use words like, if we're together, we'll collaborate better, we'll innovate together, all that sort of stuff. And that is true, absolutely. But if I'm the employee, as you describe, and I'm at home, I've got a great coffee machine, I love my lunch options, I'm really comfortable with my setup, I no longer have this hour-and-a-half commute that I do every day, I don't know, that kind of doesn't feel enough, because I feel like I'm doing a good job, right? You're giving me good feedback. My leader's giving me good feedback on my role. So then the question becomes why? How do you start to really help create the why for people? And I think there's a few things to this. One is you don't have to be all to your employees. They need to determine what role you play for them. So one of the things that we've discovered in the connection research that we've been doing in organisations is when we spoke to teams who particularly were remote and didn't have an office, what we call within close proximity, which is within 3 hours, which I know that doesn't seem like close proximity. So those that couldn't go into an office, they actually said, I connect with people in my co-working space. They're kind of like my other team, right? We all bring our dogs in. I've got great relationships with them. I actually don't need you to play that role.
Right.
So that's the first thing, right, is determine, do you need to play that role for your employees? Again, remembering we're managing to outcomes here. If that person is showing up as a great contributor to your team, engaged as a member of your team, then is it okay that they don't feel connected with you as a team, right? I think that's, that's a conversation that teams have to have themselves. Now, in our research, we've not met anyone that is saying I'm disconnected to my team, but I'm connected to them. There's a level of connection, but again, it's that intensity piece that I talked about earlier, right? You'll have some where they're like, we are all in, man, like we are all over each other, and then others that are like, we're not, and that's okay, right? I get the value, I connect through the work, and that's the difference. So I think that's one piece, is what role does the employer play for that individual? And I think with all of this, we have to come back to co-design. I truly believe that people know what they want when it comes to how they best work. What they need to do, though, is sit in their teams and kind of just get into the crux of the conversation and even ask themselves, what do we miss that we used to have? Now, the challenge will be that cohort that you talk about that are coming through and have never experienced it. They don't know what they're missing out on, right? They've not had that experience, and that is somewhat trickier. And so, I'm encouraging people to think about, could you embark on an experiment? Could you embark on an experiment of helping give these, grads in particular that are coming into your organisation a really unique experience around their work? Don't make it fluffy stuff, right? I don't want to say that because I'm probably offending a whole lot of people who do that fluffy stuff. But connect them through the work, make it fun, give them a reason to show up, and just see what happens.
I'd say that's probably the one thing that I've seen in the corporate world is a lack of really good communication internally. And to say the corporate world, most people I know probably know I'm ex-forces, and something comes up, you talk as a team, how are we going to do this? Like, you get given your high-level mission, we've got to do this. Team comes together, you all gather information, right, how do we do this? You all agree a plan, you look at each other and go, sounds pretty as good as we're going to get. Let's get on with it. But I think, so that's this collaborative thing, but businesses generally are more hierarchical. So someone with higher rank and importance makes a decision about something, usually speaks to some other important people, and they roll that out. But I've very rarely seen businesses do what you're talking about, getting people together. How do you think we should be doing this? Doesn't mean that you're going to just go and do what everybody wants, but you can collect some general consensus and probably some ideas you never had. I was having a conversation with a client a couple of days ago about we're going to be doing some work with them on employee referrals. That's why I've had a whole bunch of content going on recently about employee referrals. And one of the comments they made was, we've always traditionally offered, money, but it hasn't really made much difference to the amount of referrals we get. We upped the money and still no difference. So the question I asked was, is that what your people want to be rewarded by? And they said, we don't know. I said, well, let's go and ask them then. So in our project plan, we've got some study groups, and we get a whole bunch of people together. If it wasn't money, what would it be? Like, what would be the thing that would make you feel like this was a worthwhile thing?
Exactly.
And they went, that's a great idea. And so I came away thinking, like, we just don't do this enough.
Correct.
Like, our people aren't stupid. We hide them because they're smart. Correct. But then we don't involve them in decisions.
Exactly.
We make them all for them.
Exactly. And you know what? I use this analogy, like, are you parenting or partnering? Because if you're partnering, you're engaging your business in the decisions that they make. And there's a real power imbalance when you talk about parenting versus partnering, right? And so this power that comes down and says, oh, I'm mandating everyone's in the office and because of these reasons. Now, I can absolutely hand on heart tell you that if you got together a great group that represented your organisation, all parts of the organisation, all different types of people, different types of ways of working, right? Remote, hybrid, fully in office, part-time, full-time, all of the different varieties, and got them to design what that model looked like. Even if it looked the same as what the powers that be had designed, the engagement and the adoption, because it had been done ground up, would be far more successful, right? Because of this power imbalance. You're not telling me what to do when you've co-designed with you. There's this beautiful quote. My great friend Gemma Saunders talks about it all the time in the work she does in the diversity, equity and inclusion space. Nothing for us without us. And for me, that's the power, right? Is if as a leader, if you just keep that in your mind of how am I engaging my team in all the decisions that impact how they work and how they can be successful, I truly don't think you can go wrong. And I think if you do it with, vulnerability and humility, it says, hey, we actually don't know how to do this. Can we experiment for 3 months, what it might look like? And are we all committed to experimenting for 3 months and then reviewing? I haven't seen that not work. I'm yet to see that not work.
It's. I mean, it's brilliant thinking. It's a brilliant way to go about problem solving. I think one of the challenges that a lot of business have with that is the this is if it's I don't know if this is the right phrase, but the societal expectations that leaders and managers should know what to do,
Yes.
and this thing of come on, follow me, and you're hacking
Yeah.
through the jungle with a machete. You say, come on, this way. Yes, there's a bit of that needs to happen, but before you go hacking, maybe it's hey, it's which way is the best way to go here? Should we
Correct.
go down the jungle? Should we go through
Exactly.
it? Should we dig a hole underneath?
Yeah.
Anyone got a shovel? No shovels? Okay, well, we're not doing that.
Yeah. Correct. And just, just to add to that, the one thing that I hear a lot, we talked about leader overwhelm, is leaders are going, oh, I haven't got time to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, cool, man, no dramas. But you try and say, hey, we're all going this way. This is where we're going. And see the resistance and the disengagement you might get and the, reluctance to follow you versus maybe it takes you 2 to 3 hours to have the conversation. I can guarantee they are actually walking beside you and not behind you in that scenario. And that's the difference.
Yeah, I'd argue that it's not so much and I'm generalizing terribly, but I'd argue that it's not so much that I don't have time, it's I just don't know where to start.
Probably both, correct.
Correct.
Yeah, correct.
And I think in this societal thing, I don't want to show that I don't know how to do something because I'm expected to know and know things. And I've got this director, manager, leader, whatever title it is, and people expect me to know things.
Yeah.
Which never ends well.
No.
So we've got a whole bunch of new expectations of our workforce. This cohort coming in who are going, is this what work's all about? Glad I got into $80,000 worth of hex debt for this. I need to take me forever to pay back. I'm not smart, so I never racked up any debt. So
they're all going, maybe that YouTuber job was way better than this accounting degree I've just signed up for.
So this cohort who've got very little expectations and just wondering WTF is going on. World of work, the workplace has changed. We've got leaders and managers needing new skills. We've got businesses that need to think differently about how they deliver a workplace experience. It's a lot, isn't it?
It is a lot. It is a lot. And to touch on your earlier comment, I think when we first transitioned to everyone went home, like COVID landed, everyone went home. All we did was go, what practices do we have in the office? And we just dumped them into this virtual world. And we all learned very quickly that actually that doesn't work. That's a disaster. And I don't actually think we've made a whole heap of progress since then. And if I think about the experience of these grads that are coming through, they haven't had the luxury of what that in-office experience looked like, right? Not literally not once. And in fact, for majority of them, the end of their degrees were all remote as well, right? So they haven't even had that in-classroom time that a lot of us have in the latter stages of our degrees. And so we, one, need to stop expecting them to behave like us. They do not know. Like, again, we're parenting here, right? Let's stop parenting them. They don't know how to do it. They've not experienced it. So then secondly, we have to be asking ourselves, what are we designed for? If we're going to, let's just wipe the slate clean, how do we redesign that? And honestly, I think few organisations have done that. I have seen some that have said, right, our meeting structure, we're stopping everything and we're going to review it. But I think we need to think about that for the experience for this cohort that are coming through. And just because we love the in-office experience, it doesn't mean that they need to love it. But what we do need to do is we need to get uber curious about what they might love and look at how we could design for that.
Yeah. And just because they don't at the moment doesn't mean they won't in the future once they experience it and experience the best they can offer. Because at its best, working 5 days a week in the office to me was brilliant.
Correct. Yeah. One of in the connection research that we've been doing, there are some real core drivers of connection. One is shared experiences. So if you and I, and if you think about this logically, right, if you and I have experienced something, I go, oh, I've done this. You go, oh, me too. It's like we've instantly got this connection, right? It's like we get through that kind of surface entry layer of connection really, really quickly. The second really core driver is commonalities. So this is where we've got something in common, right? Again, we've seen in organisation all these people, they're on the pet group or they've got kids or they've got bike groups or book clubs where there's this commonality and they're connecting through that commonality. Even think about, we've had lots of examples of I've got all these friends through my kids' sports, right? Or I know all of the dogs' names at the dog park, not the owners' names, but I know the dog names, right? So this commonality brings people together. And one of the other core drivers is what we call heat moments. So where teams are experiencing and working through really challenging scenarios together. They have said, we had one team that said, I've learned more about my team in that 2-week heat moment than in working 3 years previously together, right? Because they're all hands on deck. Now, I am not for 1 second going to go and suggest you go and down, put your system offline so that you get people that are having to kind of down tools and really focus on one thing. But what I would suggest is, what could you create as part of a team forming exercise that would give the team an experience of solving something together, and put some great rituals and practices around that enable them to get to know each other. One of my clients they do lots of project work, and so the teams are in this kind of forming stage quite often. You'll be on a project team for kind of 3 to 6 months and then you're moving. The challenge was, these guys are kind of going, gosh, I feel like I'm making friends, kind of every 5 seconds. And what they've done is they've just introduced a ritual. Atlassian have this great playbook called the user manual. They've introduced this ritual that they do this user manual exercise at the start of every project kickoff. And they've determined what the categories are, but it's things like, how do I like to connect? Because we did some connection work with them. How do I like to receive feedback? What do I love? What do I loathe? When do I work at my best? Things like that. What they then do off the back of that is say, because we know what we know, how do we best prepare ourselves as a team when something goes wrong? So they agree. It's like that pre-mortem, right? So often in project, we do the post-mortem. How do we agree that we as a team are going to behave before actually shit goes down? And then the other one is, how do we agree that we'll give each other feedback as a team? And those two things really give the team this strength and confidence about how they can work together, right? Because they're doing it all before the fact. It's like knowing you've got that backup plan before you even need to, kind of tick it off. And I think it's some of these subtle practices that we need to introduce into how we work that really allow us to bring people in and connect, but also ensure teams that can be successful. It isn't just about the fluffy stuff of connection, right?
Yeah. User manuals. We've done user manuals at Crew.
Have you? Great.
We also do story time. So
great.
We get people doing story time, totally voluntary. Don't have to, but if you don't, we point at you and laugh. No, we don't. Where someone just puts a bit of a slide deck together and takes us through the life story. And we've had some absolute tearjerkers. Oh my God, you'd had this background. And,
that is another core driver of connection, is storytelling. Which is not surprising, right? We have these beautiful neurons in us that exist, and when you're telling me a story, I'm in that moment with you, and so that fosters connection. So I love that you do that. It's beautiful.
We've had people like in absolute rolls of belly laughter. When this was me at 21. This is my engagement party. Look at my hair. What was I wearing? And you get that kind of reaction, and those things foster connection.
Exactly.
We did something similar at a previous employer, and someone did the look at what I was wearing, and the next week we all went in wearing that t-shirt.
Oh, I love it. That's the best. Yeah.
Took us a week to find them, but we found them, and we all wearing them.
So
Frank
good.
says, those little things that you look back and we all still talk about that.
Correct.
Remember that knobhead?
Correct. Correct. And it's these moments, like we laugh about my apple pie moment for my kids this morning. It is these moments that they remember. And when we get stuck in the cycle of we just do the same thing day in, day out, we need something to break that circuit. We need something that, even you just reflect on your career and you think about, they are the moments that you remember, right? That were unique, that made you laugh, that made you cry, that just you went, that's what we need to create. And we can do that virtually and in office. We just have to be more intentional and purposeful about it when we do it virtually. That's the difference.
So 2 things that immediately spring to mind. In order to do, I think there's 3. First one, is there a new role in businesses that are remote where someone is looking after internal communication, not company-wide communication? So this is how we're going to roll out these things. This is how we're going to do this. We've got a new initiative. This is how because like a town hall meeting, and everyone in 300 people on a Zoom call, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But the way we need to communicate internally, the things that are important to us
Yeah.
at a macro and then at team levels, these things have changed, right?
Correct.
So, is that a role? Because good communication is a skill that not everybody has, as you can see. I think that the way that we coach leaders and that sort of stuff has got to change. But all the stuff that you're talking about, it would make sense that this would also then totally impact what I was talking about earlier, employee referrals. So great workplaces attract other good people, but then it should also impact tenure, shouldn't it?
Correct.
The retention.
Absolutely.
To fix this problem not only solves this, but the subsidiary problems that come off it.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And we've for years heard about this discretionary and indiscretionary effort, right? The reality is, if you feel deeply valued, that's what we're talking about, right? You feel deeply cared. Maybe in some organizations, you might even say you feel loved, right? Now, I'm not talking about the organization, but the people in the organization, your leader. You want to do a good job for that person, don't you? If your leader at the end of every week sent you a voice note that said, Simon, man, you did a great job this week on X, Y, and Z. Just wanted to say thanks. What's your response?
Duh.
Of course. I mean, you are talking to me. But you get my point, right, is it has a totally different impact. And the thing here with all of this stuff, I want people to go back to basics. Stop trying to do the fancy stuff. People don't want fancy. They actually want genuine, authentic relationships. On your question of the comms role, I think that role should always exist. It is really complicated to communicate a lot of information to a lot of people. And if you want to be successful and do it, and certainly the clients that I'm working with, I'm helping them to look at how do you actually turn your business strategy into a story. What's the story you're telling about it? Don't get up there with your OKRs and say, these are the 5 OKRs we're focusing on. Like, boring, man. I've already fallen asleep. Tell me why that matters. Tell me why it matters to our customer. Tell me why it matters to me as the employee. Tell me how we got to this point and tell me in a story. Like, make me feel something, because if I feel something in the moment of that story, I'm going to remember it. And that's what you want, right? And so I think there is definitely a role around comms, whether that's a role or, I mean, I think this is part of the challenge for our leaders, right, is this kind of flowing of information. You either take an approach where you stop making your leaders be the filter of the information and you start doing this, right? You go broad. And I think there's a role in place for that sort of approach.
Does this also then make business have to more, I don't know if it's the right word, more strictly live their values? Businesses talk about values, and some of us even have them on the wall. Honesty. Side note: if you have to have honesty on the wall,
correct,
you focus on the wrong things. I think most of us have moved on from that, but I still like talking about it. But most relatively mature, even in thinking, not necessarily age, businesses talk about the values and they understand those. But is what you described mean that businesses even more have to hone in on these and live these and look for the behaviours that align to these values now more than ever?
I think I want to make it even more simple for you. I want to say, if a business is saying something that they deeply believe is true, their vision, their purpose statement, their values, their strategy, the question that they should be asking themselves is, if that is true, if our vision is true, our values are true, our business strategy is true, what is the experience for my people, our employees, day to day, that tells them that that is true? Because I'm looking for that proof point, right? If you're saying, actually, our value of get shit done is, that's what we highly value that as an organisation. But my experience as an employee tells me that I've got to jump through 5,000 hoops, skip a few miles, and then another 3,000 hoops. I'm not sure that that's a value that you actually really deeply are committed to. And so that's it, right?
And by the way, we've released our last three features late.
Yes, right, exactly. But that's exactly it. And so, when we're I really hope that we're moving to a point, specifically with values, when we're moving beyond the words on the wall. Because if values are truly ingrained in an organisation, is They should be used as in terms of how the business makes business decisions, not just people decisions, but actually when we're making that business decision, we're actually saying, okay, cool, let's test it against these kind of, guiding principles. One being our values. Does it pass the test? If not, come back. Let's take it back to the board, right? How are we making sure that we are truly what we say is actually woven within the day-to-day experience? Because people can call bullshit, right? And they will.
We've all got pretty good bullshit radars, haven't
Correct.
we?
Correct. Absolutely.
You mentioned some of the research that you've been doing, some other research. Any sort of big ticket items in terms of numbers and things that we need to know about?
Well, I think it's these drivers and derailers. So I've talked about some of the drivers being, storytelling, commonality, shared experiences, and this heat moment. I think what's important to touch on is some of the derailers. So some things that are getting in the way. And they're not the sexy stuff, but they are getting in the way. One of them is, kind of the way that your business operates. So if you've got policies, processes, ways of working that actually signal disconnection, they're getting in the way, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion efforts or lack of efforts are getting in the way of connection. So one of the things that we saw, particularly in global organisations, is because we so quickly went remote in organisations, we didn't do any cultural awareness training. So we've heard stories of people saying, I'm working across cultures, but actually I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't want to offend anyone. And so the challenge then, if you think about that at a human level, right, is our brains sit in fight and flight. What we're seeking at every moment of every day, consciously or unconsciously, is certainty. So I'm trying to operate and be a really great contributing employee, but I'm kind of worried and I'm a bit anxious about whether I'm offending anyone in the process. So I'm probably not actually being the best version of myself. So there are some pieces here around, how do we make sure that as our world is changing for the people in it, we're educating appropriately through that. And then one of the other biggest derailers is proximity to an office. So again, people who have said, I'm closer to an office, feel more connected because of the activities that happen in the office. They can get involved. Those that said, we feel further away, again, we use this kind of travel distance of 3 hours being that limit, which we know is a very far distance. Said, I feel like I've got ownership for connection. I feel like the organisation's kind of lumped it onto me and said, hey, Simon, it's your problem, right? You go figure it out. So I think there's some key watch points for people as you think about how are you designing for connection in your experience, is to be thinking about what's getting in the way. Now, you can't always remove your derailers, but what you can absolutely do is design your experience knowing that it exists, right? If you're in a big organisation that has got a policy and you can't do anything about that policy, be really overt and say, hey, we've got this funky policy. It's not great. We know it's not great. How do we best operate given that exists, right? It changes the conversation.
It's about owning your problems and owning your shit and co-designing the best way to get stuff done.
Exactly. Yeah. And what I will say to all of that is, as I talk to organizations, I see this kind of overwhelm go, oh my God, where do we even start, right? And my recommendation is you choose one focus area. If you look at all the problems you have in your organization and even ask your people, if we're to fix one thing right now, what has the most impact? Just start there, start small, do a pilot, and then allow it to foster from there on in. What I have observed is it's a little bit like throwing a stone in a lake. You have this beautiful ripple effect, right? You start to see teams create these rituals and practices around fostering connection within their space. They talk to someone else, they go, oh, that's a great idea. We might start doing that. It naturally starts to happen. And know that you'll probably stuff it up before you get it right because it takes time.
One thing that I've seen businesses do really well is build ERGs, so employee resource groups, for specific minorities or similar types of people. One thing I haven't seen them do that well is for exactly what you've just described. I reckon if you gave more ownership and more freedom to some of your people to help solve these problems, if you're saying, what's the one thing we're going to focus on this quarter?
Correct.
And he wants to be involved.
Correct.
You got a couple of people from each team, and it was 2 hours a week they were spending on it together as a group, and they all go off. But you could solve some of these things.
Absolutely, yeah. What I will say to that is have some consideration about how you acknowledge the effort for those people in that space, because we see it in ERGs, we see it in culture clubs, we see these people that are naturally this way inclined that will do so much additional effort for nothing. Now, I'm not suggesting you pay people, but I'm suggesting what are other ways that you could recognise the individuals for the effort, because unfortunately, the days of employees doing a whole heap of indiscretionary work, it's changing, right? People are valuing balance, they're valuing their well-being, and as they rightly should.
Yeah.
So what you want to be doing is saying, this is really important to our business. How do we get executive sponsorship?
Yeah.
How do we make sure we give these people time and space to do the work?
Yeah.
And how do we reward and acknowledge their efforts? And if you're not prepared to do any of that, don't create the group in the first place.
Yeah.
Because they'll do it for a little bit, but it won't sustain a long-term effort.
And this comes back to the communication that we were just talking about earlier. This role, how do we get better at communicating internally?
Yeah.
I think I could do that job.
Yeah. Go.
Perfect. I've got a feeling that you and I could literally talk forever. Unfortunately, we've both got other things to do. We're 3/4 of an hour in. So I think big ticket items for people to take away. Are you parenting or partnering?
Yeah.
Co-design?
Yeah.
Think about things that are blocking.
Yeah.
The things that we're talking about. I think recognizing that for some people in your workforce who've never experienced full-time in the office, their view of the world is so much different to perhaps how ours might be. And that we need to be investing time and effort in upskilling some of our leaders with some of the things, the tools that they need
absolutely
to be able to manage and lead the way that probably most people want to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think we overcomplicate it a little bit. Most people just want to be treated well, treated with respect, paid fairly for the work that they do, and work with some other smart people.
Yeah.
On some things. And if the work they're doing is meaningful and interesting to them,
exactly.
It's not difficult.
Correct. Yeah. If I could say to every leader, every person actually, because we all play a role, the one skill that we should foster is curiosity. Because if we just ask the question, we'll get the right answer. And maybe we need to ask it 5 times. Maybe it feels like 500 times. But I think if we always come at it with curiosity, I don't think we go wrong.
Yeah.
We're not coming in with a fixed mindset, right? We're really open and we're saying, solve it with me, partner with me.
Yeah.
Those outcomes are never bad. They may not be right at the first point, right? But
we overcook it at times. This has been brilliant. This is at the risk of offending all the other guests we've had. This has been my favourite one so far.
I have thoroughly enjoyed it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We're on 47 minutes. I'm going to wrap it up there. Alana Bennett from Connected Experience. We'll add your details in the comments below on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.